Reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network.
MMO Reporter's PAX Prime coverage is brought to you by Dragon Fantasy, The Black Tome of Ice, a 16-bit styled JRPG coming soon on Steam, iOS, Android, 3DS, and Wii U. Hey everybody, Chris here from MMO Reporter, and I'm sitting with James Phinney. He is the creative director for Gigantic with Motiga. Very happy. We just had a few matches of the game, had a good time, went 1-1 against Matt, our camera guy and host of Crowfall Reporter. I did say that we got a shutout, and he did not. So I will put that out there right away. It's important to know that, and Matt can't rebut this because he's behind the camera. So
and you
now
really carried that fight, right? Like it was all you.
Yeah, completely. So let's talk about Gigantic because, as I mentioned before, first time I got to play it was at PAX East, and it's one of the games that I probably have a hard time describing to my friends when I come back about how much I enjoyed it, because it does so many things differently. So how do you describe Gigantic to somebody who's hearing about it for the first time?
Sometimes we use the term shooter MOBA because the controls sort of moment to moment, kind of like third-person shooter. But it's got some like character progression and strategic elements like a MOBA. It doesn't really have a whole lot of like traditional MOBA mechanics to it, but definitely it involves a lot of teamwork. So I generally am just starting with it's 5-on-5 fast-paced PvP, but it's got a lot of action game to it. It's got a little RPG to it, and it's got a lot of shooter as well. It's a game that we really tried to make so that we weren't concerned about what genre it was. We're concerned about trying to make a game that a lot of people could get into and enjoy. Part of that's with just the general feel of the game. We really focused on something that feels dynamic and fast and fluid and just is good to run around in. But some of it's also with the character design. So some of the characters are for people who come from a shooter background. Some of the characters are for people who want more of like complex skill interactions, and some characters are more just action brawler kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And there's a ton of characters to choose from, and there are a lot of, it feels similar to a MOBA when you're playing it because it's got that drive to get to the other end, to push the Guardian forward, and a lot of MOBA-like aspects in the character progression as well. Can you talk about, as a player plays through a match, how can they progress their character?
Yeah, as you play through the match, you level up. And you start at level 1 every game with no upgrades or anything, and then max out at level 10. So that's 9 chances to change the character. You have 4 basic skills, and then a 5th kind of super powerful skill we call the Focus. And those have a set of branching upgrades on them. Every time you level up, you can pick one. And the upgrades make the skills better, but they can also pretty dramatically change the way the skill works. So you can... you had Margrave, I think, in the game that the first game at least, and so his left mouse button or right trigger, if you're playing on a controller, is just basic attack. And you'd taken the upgrade where he's got his attack combo, and then that last hit is just this massive. This fist comes down and just bam, does a ton more damage, like twice as much damage as the normal ones. And then you can further upgrade that to like increase its offensive capability. The other branch on that would actually have been that if you perform sort of a more combination input, like back plus attack at the same time, he does a counterattack to interrupt other people and disrupt them. And so you can instantly, with that one choice, make a really fundamental change in whether you're playing this character to kill people or to help tank and defend against enemy attacks. And then all the skills do that. In addition to the skill upgrades, there's what we call talents, and those you get at particular levels 3, 5, 7, and 9. And those also can make some pretty fundamental choices about how the character is going to play.
And it's there's no items though, right? There's
right.
no currency, no items that you're purchasing throughout the game, right?
Yeah. One of the things we wanted, as I said, was accessibility. And I wanted to make a game that could work in terms of serious competitive play. But in part because of the kind of twitch scale in the game and the speed of it, I didn't think we needed to add so much complexity to get that depth. And so it's been a real learning process through development, which development always is. You go in with understanding certain things about the game you're trying to make, and then a lot of it is just trying to learn from your experiences playtesting and other people's experiences playtesting. So we've gone through a lot to just tune and refine that upgrade system so that it could have enough depth without having to have stuff like items and gold and all that stuff.
And there's quite a few characters to choose from. Like you talked about different play styles. What's the total right now?
So in the beta build, and we just went into closed beta on both Windows 10 and Xbox One. In the closed beta build, there are 15 heroes. In the demo build you played here today, there were 16. One of them sort of backed out to get retooled a little bit. And then when we play internally at the office, it's 23, 24, something like that. And obviously it takes a long time, both in terms of authoring, but a lot of it is finding the essential fun of the character, making sure we understand its uniqueness and how it should play and what things it should be triggering for you as a player, and then balance takes a long time. So it takes us a while to get there. So be a while before players have 23 characters to work with. You know.
And it's also a game that I've found on the few occasions I've had to play it that it's one of those easy to play, difficult to master ones, because I see some of the players, some of the devs were playing with us today, and they were pulling together combinations that you just don't think of unless you're playing the game every day. How important was that in your approach to designing the game, something that was easy to pick up rather than going a completely hardcore route?
Yeah, that was fundamental from the start. Like when we were saying, like, what does this game consist of? How does it work? Was I want to make a great competitive game that also people can just jump into. One of the ways I describe it sometimes with people trying it for the first time is most everything you're going to experience when you first sit down to play, you're going to first go, wow, this game is fast probably. But after that this is familiar. The controls are familiar. Everything sort of works the way I would expect it to work. There's some unique mechanics to learn, but basically everything feels familiar. But you finish playing a match and you think, I've never played that game before. This is an entirely new experience, and hopefully a cool one that you enjoy. Doing that was one of the pillars of making sure that people could jump in and play. But in general, if you're going to try to do something genuinely new, which we think that we're doing and are trying to do, you want to pick your spots in terms of what you're trying to teach players, what you're trying to ask of them in terms of uniqueness. And so it is very important for us to try to be as intuitive as possible on as many things as possible.
One thing that a lot of these competitive games are doing now, MOBAs, you look at Heart of the Storm, League of Legends, all these other games, is that they're creating a meta game that keeps players interested in the long term. Yes, the game is fun, match to match, you're having fun there, but something that gives you a sense of progression throughout, multiple games. What are you doing to scratch that itch?
Yeah, I think we're not talking in any detail about that stuff yet, but we do think it's really important. We've actually got one of our designers is full-time. That's his job, is rewards and progression. And he actually comes from a background of having worked on a few big games that have much longer term. I mean, a competitive online game, we actually do expect, if everything comes together, right, that people will play it for a long time. But it's not because of, massive amounts of content, although there will be, new maps and new heroes and things like that over time. But John, who's in charge of that stuff, was also in charge of it for Guild Wars 1, for example, which is, obviously a game that is designed even from a content standpoint to be there for a long time. And so I knew it was important for this game to bring in somebody who had that kind of expertise and could think about it not just in terms of moment to moment. He's also in charge of stuff like, when we're leveling up in the game, some of the rewards and some of the sort of badges that you get from there. But could also look at it in terms of game economy and could look at it in terms of long-term progression. A lot of things that maybe people don't always think of when they think of shooter or think of MOBA. I mean, there's some of that there, but that I felt like there was a depth of thought and a wealth of experience that he could bring to that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you just mentioned you're going to close beta on Xbox One, Windows 10. There's been a lot of integration between Windows and Xbox now. What can we see with Gigantic as far as not just playing matches, but as well as, if I've got an account and I want to jump from one to the other?
Yeah, not a lot today because we're still hooking stuff up. A lot of that stuff's a work in progress. But in the long run, what you expect is it's one account, and all of your progression, any like skins you purchased, any stuff that you've unlocked, is seamlessly shared across both. So you can say you've got an Xbox One at home, be playing that, go over to a friend's place, and they've got a PC. Free to play. Just get the game and play it there and pick up with your account with everything that you had. I think Microsoft's also looked to break down all the barriers there in terms of friends lists and achievements and stuff like that, but also in terms of control. Like if you like to play with a controller, you can do that on the Xbox One or on the PC. If you like to play keyboard and mouse, you can do that Xbox One or PC. The other,
I think you mentioned as well that you can actually, I don't know if it was just here or if it's in the game, you can jump mid-match to switch between the two. Was that just here or is that in the game?
so that is the way it works right now. We do have some things we have to figure out about cross-device play and balance. So, so sorry, just to explain what you were just talking about. Yeah, in the middle of the game, if you plug in a controller and start using it, the HUD switches and you're just playing that way because it's just on the fly. And then if you put it down and start moving your keyboard and mouse, HUD switches back and you're just playing that way. Right now, when we think about balance for shooter characters, it's not as much of an issue for the kind of brawler characters or kind of more RPG characters, but for the shooter characters, there's a responsiveness and a precision that you get with a mouse that is difficult to replicate with a controller. Like we think it's tuned pretty well, and that people like that give us a lot of positive feedback on how the controller feels, but it's not exactly the same thing. So we've been skeptical about being able to balance the two against each other. So we started with the idea that the cross-device play was going to be opt-in. And everybody in the match would say, I want to be in an environment where it's just sort of anything goes. We're still evaluating that. We want to use beta as a time to find out what the right answer is for players. But, we're not going in with a naive belief that, we'll just balance everything perfectly. That being said, a lot of the characters do, like the guy that was sitting to your left when you were playing was using a controller the entire time and was doing well. That's more comfortable for him, so that's what he wants to do. He's also not playing Imani the sniper. He's playing, Margrave or playing Alchemist or playing characters where it's not as much kind of twitchy movement anyway. So we'll figure out what the right answer is there, and some of it though may be that it's not about the machine that you're playing on, but about the input device. And if that's where we draw the line, then we maybe have to actually just disable the on-the-fly switching because it's like everybody's using a controller in this game, everybody's using keyboard and mouse. We're going to see where it goes.
Now, I know that you're always working on the game, and as a creative director, I'm sure your thoughts are always on making the game better. But when you can relax a little bit, you can go home and you can play. Which character do you jump on?
So go through cycles, and I love to play almost all the characters. There are a couple that I tend to play a little bit less, either because they're super popular, so I feel like I'm going to be sniping for somebody, or they're a little higher stress. So like Imani, again, the sniper. I have my good days as a sniper. I have my bad days as a sniper. And so depending, I may be a little more reluctant player because I want to let the team down. The character probably for the last month or so that is before that, probably Zenobia was my top. She sort of control and can disrupt what other people are doing. But probably top character right now for me is Wu. Like any game I get to play as him, I'm most amped on because he requires really good decision making and really fast reactions. He's kind of fragile and not super fast and doesn't necessarily do a ton of damage, but he can disrupt what enemies are doing, and his ability to jump, he's sort of martial arts frog, so his ability to jump high, his ability to use his tongue to pull people toward him, he can dictate the terms of the fight if you're making good decisions. If you're making bad decisions, you're dead like that. And so that kind of risk-reward for me always gives me a rush playing as him.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. Really excited to see Gigantic as it moves forward and becomes more and more open to get more people to try it out. So really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming and checking it out.
Thanks for watching the video, everybody. Don't forget to check out all the other podcasts at MMOreporter.com or by clicking on any of the links here. And please check out our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MMOreporter. Thanks, everyone, and see you in game.